Shake. Yeah, good girl.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. If you guys ever wondered why I have white hair all over my shirt, it's not actually my own hair that's falling out. It is this little girl right here. This is Suey. She's almost 2. She's my adorable husky and fellow car enthusiast. Today we've got some good stuff coming to you. It's gonna be a shorter video. I'm trying to shorten my content as much as possible here. My videos have all been like 20 plus minutes. I know that's a lot to ask out of everyone to sit in one spot and watch the same video and listen to me talk for 20 minutes. Anyways, I got a dog to walk real quick, and when I get back, we're gonna jump into today's video, but we'll be back. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, today we're gonna be talking about the 5 things you need to keep your VG30 alive with high horsepower and the oiling system flowing. So let's go. So the number one thing, it's pretty straightforward, and a lot of this stuff you can relate to any other Japanese turbo car out there that's on the market, because these are all very important factors to have when considering your oiling system. So number one, we have an upgraded oil pressure sensor. If you wanted to, you could buy an oil pressure gauge. Usually comes with a good sensor. I like to innovate. You can get a generic pressure sensor and wire it straight into your standalone ECU if you wish. This is an aftermarket one. I believe it's the Innovate DLG-1. I like Innovate gauges, so this is the one that I went with. It includes the oil pressure sensor as well as the oil temperature sensor. And the oil temperature sensor, I would say, is just as important to have as your oil pressure sensor. So if you can, get the one with the oil temp sensor included in it, or get any oil pressure gauge with an oil temperature gauge included with it. Because ultimately, when your car is up to operating temp, it's not really just your coolant that matters. It's more so your oil temperature that matters. Your engine's running the oil through all of its important components. You got your bearings, you got your turbos, all that stuff. You don't want too much oil pressure, you don't want too little. So you want the oil to be in the perfect pressure, which is usually at its operating temperature, which we'll get into that as well. Very important thing to have. Oil pressure sensor and oil temperature sensor. Now, since I'm down here and we're discussing these sensors, I'm gonna go ahead and talk about number 2. The second most important thing that you need for your motor is going to be your oil pan. Factory oil sump on these motors is 3.5 quarts. That's a twin turbo V6 holding 3.5 quarts. I think the manual says like 3.8 quarts on a twin turbo model, but most people fill it with 4 quarts, sometimes even 4.5. It's usually better to go with the 4.5 quarts. Now, oil pan, what I did on mine is I went with the Specialty Z 6.5 quart oil pan oil sump. As you can see, this is actually a factory oil pan, and they chopped it and then welded on new metal, and they included an oil temperature bung. It's just an 1/8 inch NPT port on here. So they included that with the whole thing. Again, this is 6.5 quarts. That's nearly double the oil capacity. Very good to have, very important. It's much easier to control your oil temps, and if there's any sort of contaminants in your oil, it's much more diluted with more oil capacity than it would be with a factory oil sump. Just something to consider. But again, this was a very good peace of mind. There's also baffles in this oil pan. Now, as to why Nissan only put a 3.5 quart oil sump in this car from the factory, beyond me. Doesn't make much sense. I mean, we got a V6 twin turbo, and if you ask me, that should be at least 5.5 quarts, maybe 6 quarts minimum. Maybe environment thing, maybe maintenance costs. I don't honestly know. I mean, my Honda out there held over 4.5 quarts from the factory, so who knows? But anyways, Specialty Z 6.5 quart oil pan, very good piece, highly recommended. Carrying on, we have this shiny, beautiful piece of billet CNC'd aluminum here. This is the Brett Dempsey Engineering oil filter relocation kit. This is normally where the oil filter tree goes on these motors. What this does is this allows you to run -10 straight from this side of your motor up to wherever you decide to put your oil filter, which is going to be my next point. It clears up so much space on this side of the motor, That's what a lot of people complain about with these, right? Is they're hard to work on, there's no room to work on them. Well, make it easier on yourself, duh. So you get this kit, and I have dash 10 O-ring fittings that come off of it. And then this here is just a junction with an 1/8 inch NPT to allow my oil pressure sensor to come off the side. So that's what I run. I love this setup. And that brings us to the number 4. So for the number 4, doesn't sound right either. I'm gonna get this right. One more thing. Okay, so the 4th thing I would recommend on your motor, on your car, is going to be a bigger oil cooler. This is definitely the simpler thing, and it should probably be more towards like number 2 or something. So I've been running the 19-row Setrab oil cooler here. It works great. It maintains my oil temps where I need to be. You know, this isn't, so far this car hasn't really seen the track on my old setup, so I didn't really have to worry about any crazy oil temps. But for street driving, some pulls here and there, this oil cooler has been awesome. Which leads me to the 5th most important thing that I would upgrade. And it goes hand in hand with the oil filter relocation kit as well as the oil cooler. Because with the oil cooler, you're gonna need a thermostat. I use a Improved Racing oil filter relocation thermostat. These came out from Improved Racing anyways in, I think it was like 2018, 2017, right around there. And it's easily one of my favorite things that I've done with this car, because what it does is it bypasses the oil cooler and just sends the oil right back to the motor. So it'll allow the motor to get up to operating temp and only flow oil through the cooler when it needs to. What it also does is it relocates, I'm not sure if you can really see there, but it relocates my oil filter as well. So my oil filter, instead of being underneath the motor, is now in the very front of the vehicle. And I can reach through here and grab my oil filter whenever I need. Very handy piece. I love it. It's a billet CNC'd filter relocation mount. I have it mounted to my front bumper support here. It fits wonderfully. I had to do a little bit of work with my AN fittings and some magic with all that. But real quick, why don't we go over my setup that I have in the front nose panel on my car, because I already know a bunch of you are going to be asking what's going on with this. The heck is that? So what we have here is I've got two 90-degree -10 AN fittings for each side of the oil cooler. This one runs to a 120-degree -10 AN fitting, and I've got a 30-degree fitting here and a 30-degree -10 here, and I've got a 45-degree -10 here. And all of this is -10 hose, obviously, and then there's 4 O-ring -10 fittings going into the sandwich plate. What's really gonna nickel and dime you here are the fittings. Lately, honestly, I've been purchasing the Evil Energy stuff off of Amazon. It's been working pretty good. I've been told that it's probably not the best thing to buy the -10 hose from them. Hose is very cheap, so buy the hose from elsewhere. Now, just some quick honorable mentions. It's not really oil related, but it's definitely something you should consider, is an oil catch can. Now, what I've done with mine, it's not in the car. Now, this is what I had. This is an eBay, Amazon special. It's actually called the Honda battery catch can. If you want a good look at it, these are all my fittings and stuff. And we got the breathers here on top. And this literally just sits right back in there. And that's what I've been using for a catch can. And instead of using the PCV crankcase ports, I just use the breather ports that come off the valve covers. Good investment to have, something to consider, especially once you start turning up the boost and you want to run larger piston ring gaps. You'll have extra crankcase pressure, so on and so forth. Honestly, it's just a bunch of generic stuff that you can run on any turboed JDM import motor, and I would recommend it. Higher oil capacity, oil thermostat, oil cooler, and an oil pressure sensor. Yes, one more honorable mention, because this is something I'm sure somebody's gonna mention, and I know it's been touched on by a certain engine building shop. Straight shot versus cross-drilled crankshafts. This is more of a major upgrade and not something that a lot of people would do. I'm not even gonna waste my time with it. The thing with cross-drilled cranks, typically have to overcome centrifugal force of the rotating crankshaft to send oil to the rod journals, which is typically bad at high RPM. Now, that is why I recommend having an oil pressure gauge that you can rely on and monitor your oil pressure at higher RPM, because if your oil pressure drops below like 25-30 psi at 7,000 RPM, cross your fingers. These motors do drop drastically anything above 8,000 RPM. So this is something to really keep an eye on. There are people who have modified the crankshafts to get that to work, or the alternative method would be to just buy a whole new crankshaft. I think Cali's Performance makes billet crankshafts for the VG30. They're probably a couple $1,000s, I would imagine. So if you really want to get serious, that's the way to go. Or dry sump. That's the other way to maintain oil pressure at high RPM. So straight shot, cross drilled crankshaft. Look it up. I'm not going to go into heavy detail on it, but just do your own research. But I think that's going to do it for this video, you guys. If you enjoyed it or if you learned anything new, please make sure you give me a follow, hit that subscribe button, smash the like button. If you haven't learned anything in this video, I'm sure you will eventually. I do everything I can by myself. If I don't know how to do it, I'm going to learn, and you guys can learn with me. So make sure you follow along, and we'll catch you next time.